Hello, and welcome to the classroom instruction video for the Viking raid simulation. Break students into groups of 4 and hand out Viking character cards. If necessary, you can have a group of 3 with one student playing 2 Vikings. After everyone has had a chance to get their cards and choose their Viking, it's now time to look at what the character cards actually say. Each student will be playing a particular person with specific strengths and weaknesses. There is a name. This is who you are. For example, this person will be playing Ega Skallagrimsson. Different Vikings have different skills. You would add this number when you roll a d20. We'll talk more about that dice later, but it's a dice with 20 sides instead of 6. And the higher the number, the better. So Egil has a +4 on seafaring, meaning he's really good at that, but only a +2 on fighting means that he's not as good at that. High numbers are good in this game. You always want to get high numbers. A roll is the number on the dice. The total is that number plus or minus modifiers. So at times you'll roll dice and add a number to it. That's your total. The roll is what you get on the dice, the number that appears there. The total is the number plus minuses or modifiers. You'll also notice it says that the Vikings might like or dislike someone. For example, Egil Skallagrimsson likes Bjorn Ironside because Bjorn saved him from a bear attack, but he dislikes Eric Bloodaxe because he insulted Egil's sister. Everyone has a goal. This is why you're rating and how much money you need to fulfill it. D means pence, which is plural for pennies. This is from a Latin word, I believe, which is why it's a D instead of a P. In Ega Skallagrimsson's case, he has to pay a fine of 200 pence for putting out someone's eye and wants to earn an additional 200 pence so he can finish the job by putting out their other eye. He would also like another 100 pence to buy himself a fine Viking drinking horn. Finally, there are health boxes. You check these if you become injured. If you check them all, you die. Here is a picture of a dice. As you can see, it's different from your typical device, and that's because it goes from 1 to 20, and is therefore called a d20. So when you roll it, you get a number between 1 and 20. Let's say that you are trying to make a navigation roll, and you have a navigation skill. Your Viking has a navigation skill of +2, and you're trying to get at least a 14. If you were to roll a 1, that would be a failure because 11 plus 2 is 13, which is below 14. However, a 13 would be a success because you would add 2 to the 13, giving yourself a 15. I should also point out that a tie is a success. So if your target number is a 14 and you were to roll a 12 and then add 2, you would get a 14, which is the number you need to succeed. So remember, a tie is a success. In addition to dice and some place to roll them in, you will also need a deck of wound cards, one deck for each group. These will be drawn randomly later on. And you also need coin markers. Each of these is worth 100 pence, and you will earn these by answering trivia questions correctly. So, we'll begin our voyage. We will begin our raid. Sven Forkbeard now needs to roll his navigation skill to try and find an Anglo-Saxon monastery. So, if your character is Sven Forkbeard, you need to roll a 20-sided dice and add your navigation modifier. If you have a 14 or higher, you succeeded. If you have a 13 or lower, you failed. Instructors, you may wish to pause the video to help make sure your students understand the rules, and then unpause it in order to continue. So, if you managed to roll a 14 or higher and succeeded, Sven, you managed to find a monastery in good time. However, if you failed, you were late. So you do find the monastery, but you're late getting there. Hopefully that doesn't have any negative consequences. Remember whether you succeed or not. At this point, I will not ask you a review questions. Groups are not in competition with each other to answer these questions. Instead, each group discusses what they think the correct answer is. I will then give you the correct answer, and if you got the question correct, you would give yourself a coin marker to show that you got it correct and earned 100 pence. So, which of the following was not an enemy of the Byzantine Empire? A. The Huns, B. Persia, C. Islam, or D. The Vikings? Remember, if you answer the question correctly, you would get... And the correct answer in 3, 2, 1, the Vikings. As your Vikings land, they are spotted by a small force of Anglo-Saxon guards. Eric Bloodaxe leads a force to try and defeat them before they can warn their comrades. Eric needs to roll a d20 and add his fighting modifier. If he has a 14 or higher, he stops the Anglo-Saxons, but if he has a 13 or lower, they escape. Instructors may wish to pause the video in order to help students with their rolls. Alright, if you succeeded, Eric, you managed to stop the Anglo-Saxons. They were unable to warn the people in the monastery of your oncoming attack. However, if you failed, they escape and probably went to go warn them. Hopefully everything will be okay. We now have another question. Which of the following statements about Catholic monks in the Germanic kingdoms is false? A. They frequently received protection from Germanic kings. B. They were often given land by Germanic kings. C. They prayed most of the time and so were not able to engage in work. Or D. They spread technology and Christianity. And the correct answer in 3, 2, 1 is C. Now that you have rolled your dice, we're going to see what those numbers mean. Your instructor should have treasure cards, and you will get to randomly draw those based on how well you rolled. If your modified roll was a 5 or less, you get 2 draws. 6 to 10, you get 3 draws. 11 to 15, you get 4 draws. 16 to 23, you get 5 draws. More than 23, you get 6 draws. Instructors may wish to pause the video to give students the time to draw their cards. It's now time for another trivia question. Who was Benedict? A. A monk who emphasized work and prayer. B. A monk who preached a Roman crusade against the barbarians. C. An emperor who defeated Attila in battle, stopping the spread of Islam into Europe. Or D. An emperor who defeated Leo in battle, stopping the spread of Buddhism into Europe. And the correct answer in 3, 2, 1 was A. Uh-oh, the Anglo-Saxons are not happy about you attacking their monastery. They have rallied their forces, and now you have to fight. All players roll the d20 and add their fighting modifier. Then they add those numbers together. You may wish to allow students to use a calculator or computer program to help them with this. But the key thing is all students, each individual Viking, rolls the 20-sided dice, adds their fighting modifier to that, and then each student adds their modified roll together so the group has a combined roll. Now there are some modifiers. If Sven failed his navigation roll, subtract 5 from that combined number as you got to the monastery too late to be able to set up proper defenses. And if Eric failed his fighting roll earlier against the guards, subtract 5 from that combined roll as they were able to summon additional reinforcements. Once each group has their combined roll, you can continue the video. Each group receives a deck of wound cards. If your combined score was more than 14 and less than 34, it's now time to use your deck of wound cards. It is now time to use your deck of wound cards. If your combined score was more than 14 and less than 34, you were utterly defeated and had to run to your log ship. Draw 12 wound cards and randomly discard 2 treasures. If your combined score was 34 or more, but less than 54, You are defeated but retreat in good order. You randomly lose 1 treasure and draw 10 wound cards. If your combined score was 54 or more, but less than 74, you're able to push back the Anglo-Saxons and leave. You keep all your treasure, but draw 8 wound cards. If your combined score was 74 or more, you utterly defeat the Anglo-Saxons. You gain 1 treasure that they dropped when they routed, but you also take 6 wound cards. Each wound card will instruct you to mark off a checkbox. Remember, if all of a Viking's health checkboxes are marked off, that Viking dies. If someone dies, they become a ghost. Inform your instructor and receive a ghost card. The ghost card gives you a special ability you can use to either help people you like or hurt people you dislike. Please pause the video, and then when you're ready to proceed, unpause it. It is now time for a question. Which of the following is not something the Germanic kings needed if they wanted to build long-lasting kingdoms? A. Shifting to administering territory and collecting taxes. B. Literacy and learning. C. Advanced flood control systems. Or D. Conversion to Catholicism. And I'll give you the correct answer in 3, 2, 1. It's advanced flood control systems. As you start heading towards home, unfortunately you hit a storm. Egil needs to make a seafaring test, so he needs to roll his seafaring score, and if he gets at least a modified roll of 14 or higher, everything's okay. However, if Egil is dead, then the person with the highest seafaring test score, who is still alive, needs to roll. If you have any ghosts, they can certainly use their special powers to influence the roll. You may wish to pause the video to help students make sure that they are able to roll correctly. Congratulations! If you succeeded in your roll, you make it back safely. If you failed, you randomly lose 1 treasure card and 1 or 2 Vikings. Draw a wound card. The Viking or Vikings named in it fall overboard. If a card lists 1 Viking and he's already dead, or 2 Vikings and both are dead, redraw. The surviving Viking who is still on the ship with the highest seafaring check makes another roll, attempting to get at least a 14. On a success, that Viking can choose to rescue either 1 Viking or the treasure. You may want to check your likes and dislikes. And of course, ghosts are able to intervene if they so choose. You may wish to pause the video to help students resolve this event. Eventually, the surviving Vikings return home. We can now resolve their goals. Add up the pence value of your treasures and then divide the value evenly among surviving Vikings. See if you complete your goal. Vikings can share their treasure if they have more than they need to accomplish their goal, but should consider whether they like or dislike the person involved. Perhaps apologies or promises can help here. At this point, instructors might wish to pause the video to help students see if they achieved their goals. Alright, so please raise your hand if you are Sven Forkbeard and you got his longship. Please raise your hand if you're Egil Skallagrimsson and you got your vengeance and your jeweled horn. Please raise your hand if you were Eric Bloodaxe and you got your land. And finally, please raise your hand if you were Bjorn Ironside and you got to marry Sven's sister. Now remember, Vikings didn't only care about wealth, they also cared about fame. And ideally, they wanted to be remembered in the sagas, the long songs or poems that were written about famous Vikings. So we will now determine how your fellow Vikings view you and your Viking band after your raid. To do that, we will calculate your fame score. First, 1 Viking rolls a d20. Now add +1 to your roll for each treasure your group brought back. Add 2 to your roll if you chose to save a person from the shipwreck rather than abandoning them. You have -2 for every person in your group who died in battle. You have a -4 if you abandon someone to die in the ocean. If you achieved your goal, gain 1 for each goal achieved. If you have a total score of 18 or higher, everyone is impressed with your great power and skill. You have entire sagas dedicated to your adventures. If you have a total score of between 14 and 17, everyone has a healthy respect for you. You're a minor character in some sagas. If you have a total score of between 10 and 13, people don't particularly look up to you, but neither do they look down on you. So you aren't really remembered, one way or the other. If you have a total score of less than 10, you're despised for your cowardly and foolish way, and are depicted as such in sagas written about better Vikings. Questions for reflection. How successful was your raid? Why do you think that way? What notable events occurred during your raid? What did you learn about this time period and the people who lived in it through this historical simulation?